All right, so with the season now over and the postseason now over, I wanted to take a look at my predictions that I made just before the games all started to see how well did I do with now Washington having won. To start, we'll look at the AL wildcard. So I predicted that Tampa would win, and in this case they did. My reasoning was because of Sean Manaea's poor pitching. I had predicted that because he has only been good for about just the month of September, and he was injured before that he would eventually fall off. This seemed to be the case as he lost in a 5-1 pounding, and Charlie Morton's experience with the postseason came to prove better for him. In the NL wildcard, my prediction was also right, where Washington would beat Milwaukee, although it wasn't quite as clear cut as I thought it would be. But it's kind of ironic that I said it before, that I foreshadowed that Washington would play if they played St. Louis, they'd win. So that was kind of interesting. When you take a look at the ALDS and you see that Houston beat Tampa, I predicted that as well. I didn't believe that Houston would lose to them, but as I had said as well, Tampa was surprising. They pushed to a game 5. They had made it much more interesting than I think any other fan would have thought it would have been to. And like I said, it was surprising, but it wasn't that surprising. You had to know Houston was going to win. On the other side of the ALDS, I also predicted New York would win. And this was kind of interesting because I didn't think it would be a sweep, but it did seem like a pretty easy win, and I kind of predicted that as well. I also predicted that it was largely due to the Minnesota pitching, which it was very easy to tell as they had been stomped 23-7 in the run column. So it was definitely because although New York bats are incredible, Minnesota pitching is just bad, so it's easy to get meatballs down in the middle of the plate. The first one I actually had wrong was in the ALDS with Washington versus Los Angeles. Although it was close, it was kind of funny to see this happen, and I'm quite impressed with Washington for overcoming their odds against LA. And for things to come, it still didn't matter which team it was. I had some sense of correctness. My favorite matchup of this entire postseason in the NLDS was St. Louis and Atlanta. I predicted that St. Louis would win, rooting for the home team, but also because I saw that they had potential in them. They did beat Atlanta, but it wasn't for the reason that I thought they would win. I thought that it would be their rotation with Jack Flaherty. He was so good, and Dakota Hudson, he was pretty impressive as well, and Miles Mikolas. But they weren't nearly as good in this series as they had been in the regular season. Atlanta's pitching was actually far better. Mike Soroka, Fultonowitz, he was incredible. It just so happened that St. Louis's bats came into play, especially within the first 4 games. It was in the later innings, and then obviously Game 5's 10-run first inning was the thing that capped it all. For the American League Championship Series, I also predicted that Houston would win. I didn't think it was going to be that easy of a win for them, and I thought it was going to be much tighter, but ironically, it was quite a stomping, and I was right about that. It was impressive that it was 5 games. I didn't think it would go to 7 games, but I didn't think it would be as quick as 5. I thought it was going to be probably 6. So it's impressive to see that it was that close. By default, in the National League Championship Series, I have to be wrong because I predicted LA would be facing the Cardinals. But of course, they didn't make it past Washington. So with that being said, we'll still look at it. And despite the matchup being the wrong one, the comments I made applied almost exactly to Washington as they did to LA. So when I said they were for facing the Cardinals, I said there would be a sweep. I thought LA would sweep the Cardinals because they would have been done by that point. They wouldn't make it that far. I was right about that. It just happened to be Washington that did it. And then I also said that LA would have everything that St. Louis had but better. But then when looking at it, Washington actually did have the exact same traits. They had everything that St. Louis had but better. St. Louis had a couple extremely good pitchers. Washington had 2 future Hall of Famers. And as of the comment I made in the prediction video, they were just truly outmatched. The final series within the postseason, the October madness that everybody loves of the World Series. Obviously, I had to be wrong again with LA not being there. It was Washington. But again, I had several things that were quite similar, quite exact, and they would have been the same just for Washington instead of LA. So I was impressed with myself just because I said it was going to be 7 games. I thought it would have been LA that would have pushed it to 7 games, but the fact that Washington did, that made me just as impressed. And I also thought that Houston would lose. And I mean, that happened as well. So Washington came home with the trophy. It was impressive that it just so happened to be Washington rather than LA, and that one series, had I just said whoever won that series would go on to do the rest, I would have been right for everything. And it was funny because I talked about how the home field advantage was going to play an interesting aspect, as for the Astros, they would have the DH advantage. But when I said LA, I thought, oh, they have good bats, so they could use a DH. It came in the same way for Washington, and it worked out for them because, ironically, home field advantage had the opposite effect. Every single game of that entire 7-game series was a road team win, which is obviously a new record and is something to congratulate for them. Did you think I was a wizard? Did you think I had it all wrong? Did you think that I went ahead of time? I went in the future and I guessed preemptively? Let me know in the comments below, and like and subscribe for more content. And as always, have a good rest of your day.